Hi, Dan. Welcome to the Ideas Lab podcast.
Thanks, John. Good to be here.
Yeah, so we've got a bit of a history because we did some work together on your fledgling business. And when we first met, you were working as an engineer. What exactly were you doing?
Yeah, I was working as an aerospace engineer. So I studied mechanical engineering at university and then went into an aerospace engineering company. Ended up moving to, I went to two more companies and did that for 13 years in total before switching over to photography.
So were you designing aeroplanes or something?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was doing what they call stress analysis, which is like structural analysis. So they design the parts, and then we'd have to check if they were going to be strong enough, basically.
Yeah, I did some of that in my physics HND, non-destructive testing and destructive testing or whatever. So, um, why did you want to get out and become what you are now, which is somebody running your own photography business?
I think I got into a specific area of engineering that I just wasn't really enjoying enough. I just wasn't behind it enough, really. Um, it was quite, it was quite sort of behind the desk and just working through spreadsheets day in, day out, and just going to the same office every day, and I just wasn't loving it enough, really. So I kind of always knew to an extent that I wanted to run my own business, but I never knew what that was going to be.
So how did you decide on photography then?
My wife used to have a women's clothes shop when I met her, and I we decided to have a website built at one stage for that. It was kind of by that point it was kind of struggling. We had a baby on the way and various things, but we decided to have this website built, and I thought, oh, I'll buy a camera and do the product photography for it. Don't know why, just fancied the idea and thought I could do it. So I bought a camera and started enjoying it. And we closed the shop down actually not that long after that period, within a year. But just after that, I actually picked up a paying client for the first time. It wasn't a great deal of money, but it kind of made me think, oh, I can earn money from doing something that I actually really enjoy.
Yeah, and this was I guess this is probably the client that we talk about in my book, my new book, Fuck Work, Let's Play. And so we tell your story because it's a great example of how you transition from that moment, how you win your first paycheck, which is getting paid for the first time doing something you love. And how did you do that?
Well, as I say, it was just after we closed the shop down, and my wife was actually buying some wine. We've got a really nice wine shop here in Ledbury where I live, and the lady in there we knew from my wife's business, from various things, and she said, "Oh, we're having a website built, and I've got to do this photography. I've got to take pictures of all the bottles and everything." And I've got no idea where to start. And my wife said, "Oh, I'm sure Dan will come in and have a go." So I did. There was nothing to lose. It was like, I'll just have a go. If I get something decent, then we can talk about it. And if not, no worries. So I went and had a go, and the results were good enough, and ended up shooting about 2,000 bottles of wine, I think, in the next
Oh,
couple of
wow.
months. And yeah, as I say, not charging a great deal for it because I didn't feel that I could at the time. But it was good enough for them to get their website up and running.
And you made a really interesting point when which we put in the book, which is that you you might imagine when you're new to photography that everything must be a work of art and everything must be
Yeah.
perfectly lit. And what you realize is that actually it's just got to reach, for practical purposes, when you're doing 2,000 photos of bottles of wine, it's just got to reach the quality bar that's right for them and for this project, which I think is quite an important point to make.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's easy to get hung up on thinking that something has to be absolutely perfect, doesn't it? And not shipping, I suppose, as they call it. But actually, yeah, if you get something that does the job and it looks decent, then that's good enough, isn't it? It's not like you're going to just become a photographer and the next day you're going to be shooting for, I don't know, Vogue magazine or something. Even those people have started somewhere, haven't they, and done work for people all the way along the scale.
So, did you get this first client while you were still in your job as an engineer? Yeah.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. So what happened? We closed the shop down, and we were actually just before that. I'd quit my job, and we'd gone and moved in with my in-laws just as a kind of last ditch effort to see if we could rescue the shop. But it was in slightly difficult financial position, and we decided after a few months that no, we needed to close it down. So we were left with quite a lot of debt after that. So I basically had to go back and go back to the engineering job and work to pay that off. So that was so. By that time, I was back at the job and doing that. So yeah, it was in engineering, as I say, and they tend to work 4.5 days a week. A lot of aerospace engineering companies, so you'd have Friday afternoon off. And I read your book, the first one,
Yeah,
Screw Work,
screw
Let's
Let's
Play,
Play. Yeah.
and and I read the bit about having a bit of playtime, giving yourself a bit of playtime. And I spoke to my wife and I said, look, I really want to do something. I want to change something, and this is an idea that this guy's put forward in this book. And she kindly agreed to kind of vacate the house on a Friday afternoon so that I could have a bit of playtime and just kind of experiment with a few things. And I remember reading your book and kind of feeling really motivated by it one day and just getting up and saying, right, I'm going to get out and go and take some pictures, and I don't care what anyone thinks. And, just kind of going for it. So.
This is a funny thing, because I had a couple of friends who were really into photography, and one of them was quite introverted and shy, and one of them was much more extroverted. And it was interesting. They were not really very similar characters, but we met through this same group workshop thing we did, and they met up and they went on to take photographs together. Is it Julian and Jay? Julian being the more the quieter guy, and Jay's like this really big, he's tall and like really big, kind of barrel-shaped guy who he was then, and he would just walk around with his SLR, with a giant lens just sticking out of his chest, and go like, "Hey, Julian," he's German, so I do a German accent. Goes, "Yeah, you should take a photo of that. That would be really cool." And Julian's like almost embarrassed to look like a pretentious photographer or something, and be spending too long on one photo, and Julian got a lot of inspiration from that to kind of come out as a photographer. It's a weird thing, but particularly Julian's style was to stand over something. This is what it developed over time. Stand over some tiny detail and take these art shots, which were remarkable. In the end, he had all sorts of exhibitions, and. But there is that moment, isn't there, when you have to kind of go like, okay, I'm really going to stride around with a camera and look like I own it. And hope somebody doesn't nick it off me as well, which is another concern in London.
No, it's true. I think I was a bit self-conscious at first because probably, especially coming from an engineering background, and you kind of think that being a creative is this different thing that other people do and that you're not a creative and don't be silly kind of thing. So yeah, I did feel a bit self-conscious about it, and yeah, I wish I don't remember exactly which part of your book it was, but I remember vividly one day when I was just feeling that kind of frustration. I was reading your book, and it just felt really motivated, and just got out and said, right, I'm going out. I'm just going to take pictures. And I don't care what anyone thinks, and it just starts that sort of cycle, doesn't it, of getting to the point where you can go and do something and not worry too much about what other people think, I suppose.
That's brilliant. Yes, I have those moments as well, reading other people's books. Yeah. And I remember when, I started, similar kind of story for me. I was a software engineer and then wanted to do all these creative things. And one of the early things I did, I had like 6 months out from my job. I got some redundancy from my software job. And I went and I told my story in a museum called the Museum of Me, which is in a quite well-known building on the South Bank behind Knoxow Tower, which they filmed a scene from Love Actually in. And they turned it into a museum temporarily, but it was a museum of people's personal stories. So I told my story about some aspect of my life. And the most exciting moment for me was when the night before opening, they invited everybody to come to what was basically kind of a semi-derelict warehouse, but they kind of deliberately made it cool by using a semi-derelict warehouse. And we all had we had drinks sitting around a table. And one of the organizers of the museum said, introduced me to everyone and said, "This is John Williams. He's one of the artists." And I went, somebody called me an artist. I would never have called myself such a thing. And when you come from the tech world, the idea, at what point are you allowed to call yourself an artist? And again, with my friends Jay and Julian, Jay did that right from the start. And Julian, if anything, probably had, a stronger story to say, because he was taking much more kind of artistic and you might call it shots. And he was much more timid about that. There's a whole thing about, when do you get to call yourself a creative or an artist?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've had that exact same moment as you, actually. I remember it was actually the same wine shop, because I asked them if I could come in, this was really early days, and just shoot one of their events, because they do some wine tastings and things. And I remember, being in there and the owner introducing me and saying, "Oh, this is Dan, who's a photographer." And I was like, "Yeah, I guess." You almost kind of want to say, "No, I'm not really a photographer, but I take a few pictures or whatever."
You've got to stop yourself, haven't you? It's like, it's like me. Well, I'm sort of a photographer. Sometimes you just got to bite your lip, I think. And you, and we worked together for a while, one-to-one on your business and your brand, and which became, and my website became danbarkerstudios.com, which looked pretty good right from the start. And now you've kind of niched a bit, haven't you? So what's your niche now?
Yeah, so I've niched myself towards industrial photography, basically. So, the story with it is that I put out a post probably a couple of years ago on LinkedIn while I was still in my old job, just saying, what struggles has anyone had when booking a photographer? And someone randomly came back saying that they'd struggled when it was a kind of engineering type application, because the photographer hadn't really got the subject matter that they were shooting, and as a result, the photos just didn't quite do it justice, And I sort of thought, oh, that's interesting, because as an engineer, perhaps I can bring the two together.
So does that mean you've come back around? Because, and it's funny how often this happens, right? People have this job and they quit to go and do something completely different, and they imagine those two things are never going to meet. And then sometime a bit later, like a year or two, it's like, oh, actually, the two do kind of, like, I thought I'd never use my tech skills ever again. And then I found like my entire life is spent operating online systems and that ability to kind of quickly learn technology and apps and understand how, sometimes it's quite helpful to understand how an app developer works, so I can guess how it's going to operate, even if it's not working according to the best kind of user experience. And it's been a really great competitive advantage for me. So now, what kind of stuff are you taking photos of? It's like, bits of equipment and stuff.
So I'll quite often go to a factory and do a whole shoot around the factory for the whole day, shooting different parts, different sections and different processes and that sort of thing. So that'll be for their website and brochures, and sometimes their own internal training material and that sort of thing. And then also product photography as well, because I've done a fair bit of that. I've got you can't see it from here, but I've got a decent sized studio space now where I am. I get products up here and produce some nice product photography. But having that angle, it's again, I've had the same thing, because someone mentioned it to me a few years ago. I just couldn't see how I could bring engineering and photography together, and it's taken a while and a bit of resistance, because you think that by niching that you're limiting your audience size, but actually you're just really focusing people, and so they know who they can refer you to. And I've really seen the power of it in the last kind of, I suppose, only the last 6 to 8 months that it's really started to show itself to me. I gradually started moving things over about 18 months ago, I suppose. But I kind of wish I'd have done that before leaving my job, really, I think.
Right. And I remember when you started, you were doing quite a bit of business photography and product photography. You hadn't discovered the industrial niche at that point. And what what's interesting to me is, when you compare it to how most people start in photography, they just say, I'll photograph anything, I'm desperate. But by actually focusing on businesses, first of all, they're a bit less price sensitive. There's a financial return for them. When you hire a photographer for your personal, your dating profile or your wedding, like, yes, you want great photos, but you're not going to make the money. That money's gone and you're not getting it back.
Yeah.
Whereas in a business, if you take better photos and stick them on your website, it raises your brand profile and you actually make more money. So that seems like a good kind of focus. And some of those product shots, I mean, they're not boring. They're gorgeous from what I remember. I haven't looked at your site actually recently, but really lovely, lighting scenes, and then also shots of people in their business, nice kind of informal ones, not just people sitting at a desk in a suit, but like the way people do business now. So yeah, I think that's a great thing to actually niche. How did you manage to extract yourself from your job completely then? Because that transition is often a thing that is really tricky for people to manage, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was quite a long process now looking back on it, and I was impatient and frustrated probably for a lot of it, but it kind of, I did it on the side of the job basically for a long time, just evenings, weekends, Friday afternoons. I just do whatever I could, and it gradually grew, so it started out I'd just be doing a bit, and then over time, as you pick up a couple more clients, you're sort of having to do a bit more and a bit more. And then eventually it got to the point where I needed to do something about it. And so I was contracting at the time, and I said to them, look, is there any way I can drop my days down a bit? And I don't think they usually would, but it was quite interesting. I went in and spoke to my manager, and he just said to me, why do you want to do that? And I said, because I want to build a photography business and do that full time eventually. And it was amazing, really, because he suddenly was really behind it. I think because I just told him straight up, what I wanted to do. And he started telling me these stories about, how he'd wanted to do something else and wished he'd done this earlier on, and wished he'd started a shop of some description and everything. And so they let me go. They let me go part time. I went down to 3 days a week. So I'd sort of do that for 3 days and then do photography for 3 days, really. And I did that for about just over a year, 13 months, and then kind of got to the point where it seemed like it was time to jump ship and go all in. So did
you feel like, so at that moment, did you feel like you had more leads than you could service in the 3 days that you were dedicated to photography? Is that how you decided?
Yeah, I think so. I think it was.
Or you just thought, sod it, I'm going to go.
No. I think as an engineer, I think I probably do like to have things kind of calculated as much as possible, which maybe holds me back a bit sometimes. But yeah, I got to the point where I felt like I had a steady flow of work coming in, and like I could see the next couple of months at least were looking okay. And also, I think I probably got a bit too frustrated with the job as well, and needed to do something about it. It was having a negative impact on my well-being, if you like.
It does that after a while.
A mix of those two things. Yeah, I think so. And when you focus shift so much onto what you really want to do, you're not really concentrating properly, and that's no good for anyone. It's no good for you because you feel like you maybe not doing as good a job as you should be, and it's no good for the person you're working for either.
Yeah. And I mentioned before we start recording, I do think there's the power of nice, and I've always thought of you. You're a nice guy, and it seems like an innocuous thing, but I think I wrote in Screwer Let's Play about never underestimate the value of being a nice person to deal with and to do business with. And I remember a guy saying something like, I think he spontaneously offered it. I don't think I asked him, but he said, he gave me a second piece of work, and he said, we like using you because A, we know you'll do what we asked, and B, you're a nice person about it, because there may be some fields where you can be a prima donna. You know, if you've got a stunning amount of talent as a, you know, a rock star or something like that, you can be a complete pain in the ass, as Elton John admits to in other rock stars. But if you're a normal human being, it counts for a lot. And I just remember, you know, when we finished coaching, you brought along a bottle of wine. I think it might have been, wasn't it like named something? Wasn't it called
Oh yeah,
like
yeah, yeah. It was
entrepreneurs
something.
something, or I can't remember, but
Yeah,
it was relevant.
it's a while ago,
Yeah.
wasn't it? Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And so I think
yeah.
that was a nice little
Yeah,
touch. And I have a feeling you do that throughout your work. Is that true?
yeah. I think so. Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do that. I sort of. I mean, one of the I sort of write thank you cards and things like that as much as possible. Try to make a bit of a habit of it, and yeah, occasionally give people things and stuff like that. But I think you're right. Like, yeah, a lot of it is, well, they say, don't they, people buy people rather than the actual service. At the end of the day, if you can go in and give someone a good experience because they've chosen to work with you, that counts for an awful lot. They, you know, as part of their day, they don't want to have the hassle of dealing with someone that they don't really like being there. So
And I've
yeah, I
seen,
think
you know, I've been around some photographers and not too nice. And, you know, there are some famous wedding photographers who kind of yell at everybody and just, okay, they're feeling the stress that they need to get a good, photo. So I understand that. And I was at one wedding where I was doing the video, and the professional photographer was doing the photos. And at one point, she just kind of like elbowed me out of the way. I mean, just like a kind of rugby tackle move. And it was just, I didn't know what I was doing because I'm looking for the lens, and obviously I was in her way. But it was just like, you know, punt. And it wouldn't matter if that was just about getting the photos, and then she apologized and stuff like that. But that was just the way she was, and she rubbed up a few people when she was getting them to pose as well. And so it really matters, this stuff. I like the fact that you said that you actually send people thank you notes. I know you said that very briefly, but what do you actually do? So at the end of a job, is this what you do?
No, not always. It's just, I don't know, as it feels appropriate, I suppose. I'll send someone a thank you note. I mean, it's a mixture between, yeah. I mean, when I brought you that bottle of wine, I'd never really had any other coaching apart from yourself, so it was just, I felt like the right thing to do. But also, I've heard from other people and coaches that I have that, you know, it's also a good thing to do, to send the odd thank you note and stuff. So yeah, I try and do it where I can.
Yeah, no, that's great. Do you handwrite them or do you send them by email?
Oh no, handwrite them. Yeah, I've got some. I've got some printed cards. I'll show you one that I sometimes use. So they're like,
Wow.
they're a bit branded.
Oh, nice.
I mean,
Classy. It seems like such a small detail, right? But you would, when you get, nobody sends things in the post anymore. Nobody hands writes things except for birthday cards. So it has a really personal touch. And these things, like when somebody does it and you get a handwritten card from somebody, you really remember them. It's a small thing, but it's great. And this is what, you know, most people think the world is full of photographers or full of whatever it is, whatever field you're going into. And it's so competitive. How could you ever survive? Well, how many photographers are writing handwritten thank you notes when they feel inspired to do it, or because you're not doing it necessarily every time? Or how many people buy a bottle of wine for somebody who's been coaching them? It's like they're not doing that, and they're just panicking about how they can get enough work. But there are these things you can do, like being a good person on the job, turning up on time, doing what people want, noticing, you know, and saying thank you. It really counts for a lot.
yeah, absolutely. And I think yeah, people shouldn't underestimate the amount of value that gives to people, doesn't it? You know, you say people talk about giving value the whole time, and a large part of that is, like you say, just turning up on time and not making them wait for a quarter of an hour, and just, yeah, being polite and being a nice person be around. I don't know if you've read the book The Go-Giver
No.
by Bob Berg.
Right. No.
That's a really good book.
Okay.
It's really good. Yeah, I recommend that. But yeah, that's all about kind of giving value, and he makes that point really, that it doesn't have to be a thing or stuff or anything like that. It can just be something simple like turning up on time. So, yeah,
Well, there's and one of my favorite films and favorite audiobooks of recent years is Supermensch by Shep Gordon, who's an agent in Hollywood. And it's one of the only films I've watched about 3 times. I don't really normally rewatch films. And he's got so many great stories about the 60s and 70s music scene and the crazy things that happened to him. But he ran his whole business on this concept of just having personal relationships. If somebody does you a favor, you will do them a favor. So if somebody did him a really big favor, he like his whole currency was favors. Then he would remember. And then if somebody called him in, he goes like, I'm going to do whatever you ask. And doing things where, like he said, I think Mike Myers or some celebrity was having a really hard time. And Shep Gordon was now living in Hawaii in a beautiful mansion. And it was, with plenty of space for guests. And he said, just come and move in, stay as long as you want. And he ended up staying a month or 2 or something, recovering from some heartbreak, I think. And it's that kind of thing that, you can run an entire business on that basis. In fact, Shep Gordon's amazing because he never even signed contracts for people. He managed Alice Cooper for 30 years. They both became multimillionaires and never signed a legal contract between them. But no, really? I'm not sure that's always a good idea. I know. He says sometimes that stood against him. Sometimes that stood against him because some people did move on and then like he didn't have any residual rights. So it's fine while you're in an ongoing relationship. And I don't want to persuade people they don't need contracts, but it's a great story and you made me think of it. So, so if people want to find out more about what you do, in case you want to see more of your work, kind of curious what kind of stuff you do, it's what's the website?
danbarkerstudios.com.
Cool.
And I'm also on LinkedIn quite a lot, so look me up on there. That's probably my main social media platform. Yeah, I'm just Dan Barker on there.
And I'm connected with you on LinkedIn, aren't I? So people will be able to see.
I think so, yeah.
If anyone's connected to me, they'll be able to find you fairly easily. And so you did a little kind of guide for photographers, was it, about starting their own business?
Yeah, so I did a talk at the art college near me in Hereford back at the beginning of the year. And yeah, they wanted me to talk more about sort of running the business aspect because I think in the art college they kind of get taught, all about the art side, obviously, and not quite enough about the business side. And so they invited me in to do a talk. So I put together a little PDF of kind of some of the lessons that I've learned through starting my own business. And I've put that on a link for your listeners if they'd find that interesting, which is at danbarkerstudios.com/ideas lab.
Okay, great. So we'll put that link on the website, on the show notes as well. So people go to the ideaslab.org/podcast. You can find all the notes. And but that's danbarkerstudios.com/ideaslab. And is that a guide specifically for photographers or just for creatives in general?
Yeah, it's probably creatives in general. It's from my experience, so it's kind of a little bit more, photography tailored, if you like. But I think it would apply to lots of different creatives and people from all areas.
Good. Okay. Well, it's been great to see the evolution of your business, and I'm glad.
Well, no,
yeah, it's been quite a few years, I think.
Yeah. I think we did that coaching about 4 years ago, I think, didn't we? So
right.
It's it's funny. I remember at that time when you helped me to build the website and everything, but not in terms of building it, but guiding me through what actually looked good. And I was perching on the end of there was someone in the space here who used to do fabric printing, screen printing, and I was sort of perching on the end of their table. And now I've got sort of 3/4 of the area up here, which is getting on for 1,000 square feet. So
Wow.
It's good. But I was just really grateful to have picked up your book at that time, and and you know, the motivation that I got from it, and also the coaching that you did with me, because it was
Yeah.
set me in the right direction.
Well, and thanks for sharing your story, which now, you know, some of what we've said and some other details are captured in a new version of Screwwork Let's Play, which, as I mentioned, is
Yeah.
called Fuckwork Let's Play. People have probably heard me talking about this already, and that's coming out August the 30th. So, and I think you're in the chapter which is about making your first play check, but I can't remember. Can you? Can you remember what chapter you're in?
No, I don't. I
No.
don't remember. No.
So I think it's
No,
about that
thank you.
though. Or it's
Very
about going
excited.
full time, one or the other. So, but it's about that, because I think this is a really interesting story you've told us about how you go from completely unrelated full time business to doing what you really want to do and making a success of it, having your own studio and everything. So, thanks, Dan. It's been brilliant.
No, thank you, John. It's been good to catch up, and thank you.